I'm the Senior Conservation Officer for Yorkshire and Humber, and I work for the RSPB. Today I will be talking about marine and coastal birds. Right. So, as Michael kind of mentioned in his opening speech, the East Mee region is incredibly important for birds. That's very much reflected in the SBA network down the East Coast. And we have the likes of the Filey and Flamborough, SBA up there at the top of the map, all the way down to the Outer Thames Estuary right at the bottom, and a whole plethora of other SBAs, which are essentially internationally important sites focused on birds that are in decline and need our intervention. Regionally, it's an incredibly important area for birds. For example, we breed in seabirds, largest UK mainland colony up at Flamborough and Filey Coast SBA. There are wintering and passage wildflower wading birds on the Humber, the Wash, Braden Water, which is essentially in the Broadlands, Minsmere, the Old Orwell Estuary, and the Stour and Orwell Estuary. And we have a lot of beach nesting birds as well, so Humber, North Links Coast, the Wash, North Norfolk, and Suffolk. And just to kind of give a reflection of how important this region is, in 2026, the region housed nearly 60% of the UK's breeding little-tern population, which when you think of the UK as a whole, that's actually a really huge amount that we actually have within this small part of the East Coast. So today I will be focusing primarily on two species, though I will kind of go into detail about some others on the coast. I'm looking at kittiwakes and little terns, the reason being that we have a lot of data for both these species, and to be honest, if I actually spoke about birds and all of the data we had, we'll probably be here until next week, so trying to target those where we have a lot more information to share. The two bars above are from the species monitoring programme, and essentially we've got abundance and for little tern on the right and kittiwake on the left. How it's presented is you've got an index where on year one essentially of the monitoring programme, which started in 1986, it starts at 100, and then as a trend it shows you any changes kind of increase or decrease essentially in that population. So you can tell on the left here, kittiwakes, there's not a huge difference actually, that trend's pretty much across the board. The little tern, you're probably seeing a slight shift in terms of a decrease in terms of that population over that 40-year period. Looking at productivity for these species over that 40-year period, at the top we have kittiwake productivity, so this is essentially 6 fledged per pair, and it's kind of, if anything, I've not got a best fit line there, but if anything it's kind of gone down a bit, and we're looking at reduction in productivity. With little terns, in terms of their breeding performance, it's less of a clear picture, it's obviously, you're looking all over the place over that 40-year period. What is worth noting is that orange line, which is essentially the productivity needed to increase the population, not just maintain it. For little terns, we've got that orange line in there, and you can see that actually only a couple of years over the last 40 years have we had the productivity we need to maintain that population. The picture for kittiwakes is a little bit more complicated because essentially we don't quite know what that figure is. There is a figure, it's 20 to 30 years old and not all that reliable. So as it stands, we're not quite sure how many chicks we need fledged, but we can assume that, as you see on this graph, it's less than one almost every year, so it's not a great picture. So, in terms of 2025 and key observations, I'm going to move slightly north of East Mee here with Scarborough, because we have work going on in Scarborough where we're monitoring the population. And in 2025, we had 2,128 nesting pairs in the town, and 219 in Bridlington. Productivity in the town centres were actually down in 2024 with 0.73 and 6.7 respectively. And those are sites that are monitored 4 times a year between June and July. This is important because the next figures I'm going to give you for Filey and Flamborough SBA are based on weekly monitoring, so they're not comparative between that and the town centres. So for Flamborough and Filey Coast, for 860 nests monitored across 16 plots, productivity was at 0.51, which is below the previous 10-year mean of 0.68. Last year was particularly bad actually for kittiwakes. We saw a real drop in numbers and productivity. We're not quite sure. We think it might be something to do with weather conditions, food supply. We're hoping maybe we see an uptick again this year, but wait and see. At Filey and Flamborough, sites are monitored weekly, as I say, from May to July by staff and volunteers. And the monitoring along the wider productivity monitoring of the SBA has been going on since 2009. So the Scarborough and Brun data has only been collected since 2023. So we've got a lot more data essentially for Filey and Flamborough as an SBA. At Lowestoft, we got 229 annual occupied nests in 2025 with 872 chicks, which worked out productivity of 0.93, so that's nearly 1 chick per nest. Which is actually pretty good. The figure comes from a monitoring initiative launched by Scottish Power Renewables, but for many years that monitoring has actually been done by local volunteers. The RSPB are involved, and now the council, Suffolk Council, have a project officer that are leading this monitoring work. So there's been quite a lot of involvement from the wider community in gaining those figures over previous years. On to Littleton. So on the Humber Estuary, which is the most northerly point essentially with little terns within the eastern region, we've got Beacon Lagoons, which actually had its best season ever last year for breeding little terns with 105 breeding pairs. And that's since the 1970s, that's the biggest figure, so amazing results. And we have been doing quite a lot of work actually at Beacon Lagoons to try and maintain and improve that habitat. So that might be a sign of all the great work that everyone's been doing. Productivity for 25 was 1.02, with a 5-year average of 1.19, which is again relatively good. On the Lincolnshire coast, so Gibraltar Point, there are approximately 15 pairs, and they're trying to achieve a minimum of 0.5 chicks per pair. It's worth noting for Gib Point that 20 years ago, there were actually about 120 pairs, so going down to 15 is quite a reduction in terms of the number of pairs that we're actually seeing there. And those few sites are remaining remnants of little tern, breeding little tern on the Lincolnshire coast. But again, the Links Wildlife Trust are doing an amazing job trying to preserve that habitat for those species. On the North Norfolk coast, SBA, there were 360 pairs last year, with 490 chicks fledged, so 1.18 productivity. And on the East Norfolk coast, actually high productivity, 1.69, and 270 pairs in total. On the North Suffolk coast, we had 134 pairs, 10 chicks fledged, with a productivity of 0.07, which is obviously incredibly low, but this was put down to kestrel predation and disturbance by photographers. Unfortunately, diversionary feeding and additional kind of support through wardening is planned for 2026, so hopefully that will help. In terms of productivity, obviously you can see quite a shift in terms of productivity for kittiwakes, which is often sat around 0.6 to 0.89ish, and little terns we've got far higher productivity, but still that productivity is arguably not necessarily high enough to maintain and certainly improve that population. So just on to other species, so we're not entirely focused on our little terns and kittiwakes. Racer and guillemot both had pretty low productivity at Filey and Flamborough Coast SBA in 2025, unfortunately. I think that's in part due again to food availability and access. With gannet, a trial use of drone photography for seabird population monitoring recorded 18,998 apparently occupied nests, indicating a 5% increase on last year for gannets, and continued recovery from 2022 and avian influenza. I'll go on to avian influenza a bit, because it's obviously been somewhat of a challenge and has impacted those numbers over recent years. In terms of ringed plover, the Humber Estuary, on the North Bank, we had 26 pairs and 24 fledged. At Gibraltar Point, 15 pairs fledged and 30 juveniles. In North Norfolk, where we see our highest numbers, we had 182 pairs with 226 chicks fledged. And in East Norfolk, kind of the East Norfolk, North Suffolk area, 34 pairs and 58 chicks fledged with a productivity of 1.71. And finally, on to redshank, technically vaguely coastal estuarine. So on the Humber estuary, we did our first full redshank survey actually in 2024, and repeat surveys at our Technium Reserve in 25 that show the population is maintaining and resilient, which is again fantastic news for redshank. In North Norfolk, 597 redshank pairs were recorded, breeding on the salt marsh in 2024, and 28 pairs on the National Trust Reserves. This builds on the estimated 1,074 nesting pairs on the Walsh salt marshes in 2022. So, on to the challenges that we're facing. So, we can assume across the board, and this isn't just for kittiwakes and littleterns, this is a lot of the other species, the coastal and marine species that we see down the east coast, that food supply is one of the major issues. Sand eel availability and or accessibility affects a lot of the key species like your kittiwakes, and although I haven't mentioned them, I felt like I had to put in a picture of a puffin, because everyone loves a puffin. And we suspect and hope that sometime in the next few years, the closure of the sand eel fishery will lead to an uptick in those populations. But at the moment, it's still a challenge, and it's still resulting in a low productivity and low yields for a lot of these species. Similarly, trawling continues to create challenges through bycatch and shrimp loss, in particular the impact it has on littleterns. As I mentioned earlier, avian influenza is still continuing to result in fewer numbers, we believe. Nothing quite like 2022 and the following years though, so we are seeing improvements in that front. We're also doing work with the likes of University of Edinburgh, who have actually found that the black-eye birds, the ones that had avian flu, are actually just as successful at breeding. So we're really hopeful that that impact is going to be limited. One of the other significant challenges we're facing is coastal change. So essentially loss of habitat. This is happening all the way down the east coast. On the likes of the Humber, where I work, we're seeing places like Beacon Lagoons, which currently a great site for little terns, but we are looking into replacement habitat and other options just because we're losing that land quickly. Recreational disturbance, I think it speaks for itself. Again, predation, diversion refeeding seems to be working quite well, but there are no solutions identified yet for how we can progress this work. Around spatial planning to protect the best areas of marine and coastal species, and challenges around urban breeding goals, so particularly kittiwakes, and that narrative and relationship in terms of human-wildlife conflict. There's been a lot of successful stakeholder engagement over the past few years, though. Work is going into communication tools, particularly Littletern in North East Norfolk. We continue to collaborate and discuss opportunities with the likes of BTO, and work closely with other NGOs and regulatory authorities, businesses, the farming sector. And ongoing work across the East Atlantic Flyway, as Michael mentioned, is giving us real opportunities to engage a wider community and raise the profile. We've done a lot of community outreach across the area. Norfolk has dedicated community engagement staff, Jib Point have an engagement team, we've got field engagement staff at Spurs, and Benton attracts a lot of visitors. In Norfolk they have the Turnaround Project, which has a lot of volunteers, and the Plovers and Peril Project, which also has a lot of volunteers. And then we have a lot of wardens working across the area, working 24-hour periods, protecting a lot of these species that are at risk in terms of recreational disturbance. So next steps, we want to see more resource and funding for staff to deliver the work and to support those volunteers and coordinate volunteers. A greater survey effort to provide appropriate coverage and ensure sufficient numbers of birds not being overlooked. A review of current survey approaches and their effectiveness. And actually finding individuals with the right skill sets to undertake surveys like WEPs. We want continued policy support to protect and improve offshore fishing areas. A lot of work has been done around that and continues to be, but there's more that can be done. And finally, we want to create new habitat and enhance degraded habitats to give space for coastal birds, which will be really important to reflect coastal adaptation planning and shoreline management plans. And again, a lot of that's happening, but we want to see as ever, more of this and more effective relationships. So yeah, just quickly, thanks to everyone who supported me with the development of this presentation, Links Wildlife Trust, BTO, National Trust, and various RSPB colleagues. Thank you very much.